Logan Pierce had exactly 3 rules about Victoria Sterling. Don't argue with her in public, don't take her silence personally, and never, under any circumstances, let her see you sweat. He'd broken the third one the moment she slid into the passenger seat and told him, without looking up from her phone, that she expected to be back in the city by 9. That was before the snow, before the mountain road disappeared under 6 feet of white silence, before the last lodge in 40 miles handed them a single key and said, with genuine apology, "Only one room left, one bed." If this story already has you hooked, hit that like button right now, drop a comment with the city you're watching from, and follow all the way to the end. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The morning it all went sideways started the same way every bad morning starts, quietly, with no warning at all. Logan Pierce was up at 5:15, the same as always. Not because he wanted to be, but because Harper had climbed into his bed at some point after midnight and was now occupying approximately 70% of it, one small knee wedged firmly into his rib cage. He extracted himself without waking her, stood in the hallway for a second just listening to her breathe, and then padded into the kitchen to make coffee he wouldn't have enough time to finish. The apartment wasn't large. It had never been large. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom with a temperamental hot water heater, a kitchen where the overhead light flickered if you didn't flip the switch at exactly the right angle. Logan had learned all its particular moods the way you learn the moods of something you've accepted you're stuck with. The place served its purpose. It kept Harper warm and dry and close to her school, and that was the entire list of requirements. He poured the coffee, checked his phone. 3 emails from the office, all sent after midnight. One from his manager reminding him that the Hargrove presentation materials needed to be loaded onto the shared drive before the team left. One from HR about a reimbursement form he'd apparently submitted wrong 3 weeks ago. And one from the scheduling coordinator at Sterling Capital, terse and entirely lowercase, informing him that Ms. Sterling will be riding with you to the summit. Car leaves at 7 a.m. sharp. Do not be late. Logan read that last one twice. Then he put his phone face down on the counter and stood very still for a moment. Victoria Sterling did not ride with employees to off-site meetings. She had a driver, a private one, not the company fleet. She had a preferred route, a preferred departure time, and according to office legend, a preferred atmospheric temperature inside any moving vehicle. The idea of her voluntarily choosing to ride 2 hours into the mountains in Logan's 6-year-old company sedan with the heating vent that rattled was so foreign that for a brief, uncharitable second, he wondered if the email was meant for someone else. It wasn't. He woke Harper at 6, made her toast and a scrambled egg she mostly ignored, and called Mrs. Delgado from down the hall to come sit with her. Mrs. Delgado arrived in her housecoat with a paperback novel and a container of homemade soup she'd apparently been planning to deliver anyway. She waved Logan off with the practiced ease of someone who had done this many times, which she had. "Go," she said. "She'll eat when she's hungry." "She has school at 8:15 to eat." "I know when her school is, Logan." He kissed Harper on the top of her head. She was already absorbed in a cartoon, a piece of toast hanging from her hand. "Bye, Daddy," she said, not looking up. "Bye, Bug." He grabbed his overnight bag and left. Victoria Sterling was standing outside the Sterling Capitol building at 6:58 a.m., which shouldn't have surprised him, but somehow did. She was in a charcoal wool coat, her dark hair pulled back with the kind of effortless precision that probably cost money to achieve, a leather carry-on at her feet and her phone in her hand. She was reading something. She didn't look up when Logan pulled to the curb. He got out and moved to take her bag. "I've got it," she said, still not looking up. "It's not a problem, Ms. Sterling." "I said I've got it." She opened the rear door herself, set the bag on the seat, and got in. Logan stood on the sidewalk for a second. Then he got back in the driver's side, adjusted the mirror, and pulled into traffic. For the first 10 minutes, neither of them spoke. Victoria typed on her phone. Logan navigated the morning rush, took the on-ramp to the interstate, and tried not to think about the heating vent rattling at irregular intervals like something loose in the engine, which he was fairly certain was not what it was, but could not completely rule out. "The Hargrove file," Victoria said. Logan glanced in the rear view. "What about it?" "The revised projections. Did you update them with the Q3 figures?" "Yes, uploaded them to the drive last night." "What time?" "Around 11. She typed something. A pause. "The formatting on slide 9 is inconsistent." Logan's jaw tightened, just slightly. I can fix it when we get there. It should have been correct the first time. You're right, I'll fix it. She went back to her phone. This was the dynamic. Logan had worked at Sterling Capital for 2 years, first as a mid-level analyst and then, after a promotion he'd had to fight for, as a senior associate in the acquisitions division. In that time, he'd had exactly 4 direct conversations with Victoria Sterling, and all 4 had followed roughly the same pattern. She pointed out a problem. He acknowledged it. She moved on without any indication that the interaction had registered as a human exchange rather than a systems correction. He didn't take it personally, or he'd learned not to. What he'd observed was that Victoria Sterling was not cruel, exactly. She was precise. She had a particular idea of how things should function and very little patience for the gap between that idea and reality. She was also, by any objective measure, exceptional at her job. Sterling Capital had tripled its portfolio value under her leadership. She'd closed 3 major acquisitions in a single quarter that analysts called impossible. She demanded the same standards from everyone around her that she demanded from herself, which was either admirable or exhausting depending on how you looked at it. Most people at the office thought it was exhausting. Logan had always quietly thought it was both. The road up to the summit gets narrow past Ridgeline Junction, he said after a while. I want to make sure we're through it before the weather window closes. Victoria looked up from her phone for the first time. What weather window? There's a front moving in. Should be fine if we're through the pass by noon. She looked at him in the rearview mirror, a long, assessing look, the kind that felt like she was running a quick calculation. You checked the forecast. I always check the forecast when I'm driving mountain roads in November. Something shifted in her expression. Not softening exactly, more like a minor recalibration. Fine. How long to the pass? About an hour 40 from here. She returned to her phone. They drove in silence for another 40 minutes. The city fell away behind them, replaced by the wide, flat stretches of highway that eventually bent north and began to climb. The sky was clear over the valley, cold and pale blue, but Logan had been watching the horizon to the northwest, where the clouds were sitting low and heavy and moving faster than clouds usually moved this early in the day. He didn't say anything. He drove. At the base of the mountain grade, they stopped for fuel. Victoria remained in the car. Logan went inside and bought 2 coffees, black because he didn't know how she took hers and didn't want to guess wrong, and set one on the console beside her door without comment. When he got back in, the cup was in her hand. She didn't say thank you, but she didn't put it down either. The grade steepened. The road began to wind, pressing back and forth through forested switchbacks, the valley dropping away below them and the tree line thickening on either side. Logan downshifted and focused on the center line. Victoria had put her phone away. Cellular signal had gone the way of the flat ground. You grew up here? She asked. Out of nowhere. He glanced in the mirror. In the mountains, you mean? In the region, your accent. Logan blinked. He hadn't been aware he had an accent. About 200 miles east of here, small town, you wouldn't know it. What did your family do? My dad worked a mill. Mom waitressed until she hurt her back, then she didn't. He said it simply, the way you say things that have been smoothed down by time. Not a complicated story. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Most people try to make their stories sound complicated. Most people are uncomfortable with the simple version. She looked out the window. The trees were pressing closer now, the road narrowing, the light going a strange flat gray. Where's the mother? Victoria asked. Logan didn't answer right away. Of your daughter, she added, as though he might have misunderstood the question. I've seen the file. Emergency contact is a neighbor. She passed away, Logan said. 4 years ago. Another silence, different from the previous ones. I'm sorry, Victoria said, and it came out like she meant it, which surprised him. She didn't strike him as someone who deployed that phrase lightly. Thank you. The wind picked up. Logan felt it push against the side of the car, a solid gust that rocked them slightly on the road. He checked the sky. The clouds to the northwest had moved. A lot. We need to move faster, he said. We're on a mountain road. I know, but that front has sped up. He pressed the accelerator slightly, watching the tree line, watching the way the branches were starting to lean. They made it to Ridgeline Junction at 10:47. Logan checked the weather station at the small services building on the corner, a manual board with magnetic tiles that someone updated by hand. It read, Past conditions deteriorating, use caution. He used caution. He also drove faster than caution technically allowed. The snow started at 11:15. Not slowly, not with the usual polite preliminary dusting that gives you a chance to decide whether to pull over. It came in sideways, sudden and dense, the kind of snow that doesn't so much fall as arrive all at once like it had been waiting behind a curtain. Visibility dropped from clear to poor in under 3 minutes. Logan hit the wipers on high. "How far to the lodge?" Victoria asked. Her voice was steady. He gave her credit for that. "About 12 miles. And if we can't make the pass? Then we go back down." He tried going back down at 11:30 when the road ahead disappeared entirely, and he couldn't tell where the pavement ended and the shoulder dropped. He put the car in reverse, crept backward to a small pull-off, and turned around. The road down was already gone, not metaphorically. The snow was coming so fast and the temperature dropping so quickly that the tire tracks they'd made coming up were filled in, and the road surface itself was buried under a sheet of white that had no visible edges. Logan stopped the car. He looked in the rearview mirror. Victoria was looking at the road behind them. Then she looked at him. "Talk to me," she said. "We're in a valley pocket. Snow's coming off the ridge faster than the road below can clear. We don't have enough traction to go down safe." He put the car in park. "The lodge is 12 miles up. There's no other structure between here and there." "How sure are you the lodge is still accessible?" "Not very." He picked up his phone. No signal. He tried the radio. Static, then a burst of weather advisory that told him nothing he didn't already know. He turned it off. Victoria sat very still. She wasn't panicking, which under the circumstances struck him as either impressive or concerning, and he couldn't decide which. She unzipped the front pocket of her carry-on and produced a small satellite communicator, a personal GPS device, the kind that serious hikers carried into remote terrain. Logan stared at it. "I was in the Andes last spring," she said, without particular expression. "I've learned to pack accordingly." She sent a status ping, their approximate coordinates, and a brief message flagging their situation. No guarantee anyone would act on it quickly, but it was more than Logan had managed with his phone. "Okay," he said. "Then we move up. 12 miles slow is better than stranded here with no shelter." "Agreed." He put the car back in drive. Good. The 12 miles took an hour and 45 minutes. Logan drove with both hands on the wheel, and his attention entirely on the small cone of visibility his headlights carved out of the white wall ahead. Victoria didn't speak, didn't fidget, didn't make the situation worse by narrating her anxiety. She watched the road from the front seat. She'd moved up from the back at some point during the first bad stretch, without asking permission, and he hadn't said anything about it. They ran off the road twice, neither time badly. Once sliding into a shallow drift on the shoulder, once fishtailing on a curve before the tires caught. Both times Logan corrected without comment. Both times Victoria gripped the door handle and said nothing. The third time, at the top of a long sweeping bend about 2 miles from the lodge, the car slid sideways off the road and came to rest at an angle in a snowbank, the front wheels spinning free, the rear axle settled hard into something solid that wasn't road. Logan cut the engine. The silence that followed was very loud. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yes." Victoria released the door handle. Her knuckles had been white. "You?" "Yeah." They sat for a moment. Outside the windows, the snow came down without any particular interest in their situation. "The car's not getting out of that," Logan said. "I know." 2 miles to the lodge on foot. Victoria looked out at the snow. She was wearing the wool coat. Good boots, he noticed. Ankle height, leather, not ideal, but not the city heels he'd been half expecting. She pulled her carry-on from the back seat. "Then we walk," she said. They walked. Logan had his overnight bag on one shoulder and Victoria's carry-on over the other. She hadn't argued about that. The snow was knee-deep in places, uneven, deceptive. What looked like a flat surface sometimes wasn't, and Logan went through a thin crust into an air pocket up to his thigh twice in the first half mile. He pulled himself out both times without making a production of it. Victoria was quiet and methodical behind him. She followed his path exactly, stepping where he'd already compressed the snow, which was smart. He didn't tell her it was smart. By the time the lodge appeared through the trees, a long brown building with yellow light in the windows and a parking lot barely visible under 4 feet of white, Logan's legs were burning from the thigh down and his fingers had gone numb in his gloves. Victoria was breathing hard and had stopped talking entirely, which was a change from her earlier silence in that this one seemed earned rather than chosen. The warmth inside the lodge hit them both like something physical. The woman behind the front desk looked up from her computer with an expression that moved quickly from surprise to relief to something more practical. "You walked in? From where?" "Car's off the road about 2 miles back," Logan said. "We need a room." The woman, her name tag said Marjorie, and she had the weathered competence of someone who'd worked this desk through many bad winters, tapped her keyboard, paused, tapped again. "I've got one room left," she said. "Third floor, far end, king bed." She looked at them both. "It's all I have." Logan felt Victoria go still beside him. "That's fine," Logan said. "It is absolutely not," Victoria started. "Miss Sterling." His voice came out quieter than he intended, and steadier. "It's fine." Victoria looked at him. He looked back. Her jaw was tight, and her coat was soaked through at the shoulders, and there was a smear of road salt on her left cheek from where she'd caught a gust during the walk. She looked at him for a long moment, then she looked at Marjorie. "Is there a cot?" "I can check the storage. That would be appreciated." They got the key. They rode the elevator in silence, dripping on the floor, Logan with both bags, Victoria with her hands in her pockets. The room was at the end of a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of pine cleaner and wood smoke from the fireplace somewhere below. The king bed was exactly one king bed. There was, leaning against the wall where Marjorie had apparently carried it, a cot that folded in half and appeared to date from roughly 1987. Victoria looked at it. She looked at the bed. She looked at the window, which showed nothing but snow and darkness. "I'll take the cot," Logan said. "You're taller." "I've slept worse." She didn't argue. She unzipped her bag with focused efficiency, pulled out a dry sweater and a pair of lounge pants, and walked into the bathroom and closed the door. Logan set the cot up near the window, checked its structural integrity with some skepticism, and sat down on it. It held. Mostly. He pulled off his boots, which were soaked through, and set them near the small radiator against the wall. He found dry socks in his bag, changed into them, and then sat still for a moment with his elbows on his knees, staring at nothing in particular. He thought about Harper. She'd be home from school by now, probably watching cartoons with Mrs. Delgado, probably not worried, because Harper trusted the adults in her life with a confidence that Logan secretly found both touching and terrifying. She trusted that he would come home. She always trusted that. His phone had no signal here either. He'd check in the morning, try the lobby. The bathroom door opened. Victoria came out in the dry clothes, her hair down for the first time, dark and slightly damp at the ends, longer than he'd realized. Without the coat and the professional posture, without the phone in her hand, she looked younger. Not softer exactly, just less constructed. She pulled the desk chair to the window and sat, looking out at the storm. Logan lay back on the cot. The springs complained. "There's a heating vent over the bed," Victoria said. "You should sleep there. I'll take the cot." "I'm fine." "You walked half the trail in thigh-deep snow. Your core temperature is lower than mine." "I grew up in cold country." "That's not how physiology works." She said it without any particular irritation, just flatly, as if correcting a misunderstanding. "Take the bed." Logan looked at the ceiling. "We can just split it. Stay on your respective sides. It's a king." A long pause. "If that's what you want," Victoria said. Her voice was entirely neutral. "It's practical," Logan said. "Fine." He stayed on the cot. For about an hour, he stayed on the cot. Victoria sat in the chair and worked on something in a small notebook. Actual paper, which surprised him. The storm outside pressed against the windows. The radiator ticked. The cot springs complained every time Logan shifted, which was often because the cot was approximately 6 inches too short and appeared to be engineered specifically for maximum discomfort. At some point around 9 o'clock, Victoria stood up, pulled back the far side of the bed's comforter, got in, turned away from his side of the room, and said nothing. Logan lay on the cot for another 20 minutes. Then he picked up his pillow, walked to the far side of the bed, and got in. Victoria said nothing. He stared at the ceiling. Outside, the wind found a gap somewhere in the building's old structure and made a low sound, steady and slightly mournful, that didn't stop. "Your daughter," Victoria said after a while. She was still facing away. "What's her name?" "Harper." "How old?" 7. 8 in February. A pause. What does she look like? Logan wasn't sure why she was asking. He wasn't sure she knew why either. Like her mother, he said. Dark hair. She's got these eyes that look like she already knows you've done something wrong. Victoria made a small sound that might have been a laugh. Might have been. She sounds difficult, Victoria said. She's 7. She's not supposed to be easy. No, Victoria said. I suppose not. The wind kept going. My mother thought I was difficult, Victoria said. A longer pause this time, like she was deciding whether to continue. She wasn't wrong. What happened to her? She's fine. She's in Florida. We speak on holidays, mostly. Another pause. I was not the daughter she planned for. She planned for someone else? She planned for someone who wanted the things she wanted. Husband, house, the particular kind of life she understood. Victoria's voice was completely even. I wanted the company my grandfather built and then gave to someone else because I was a woman. So, Logan absorbed this. Did you get it? I built a better one. He almost smiled. Yeah, I know. Victoria rolled over. He turned his head. They were on opposite edges of the king bed with what felt like a very deliberate 3 feet of space between them, and she was looking at him directly for the first time since the car, not with the assessing calculation she usually wore, but with something plainer, like she was just looking. You've worked for me for 2 years, she said. 23 months. You've never applied for a promotion you didn't qualify for. I try not to waste your time. You've also never told me when something I've decided is wrong. Logan held her gaze. You haven't been wrong yet. That's not possible. You've been efficient in ways that might cause friction later, but wrong, not yet. She studied him. That's either very diplomatic or very specific. Second one. A small silence. Then, the Whitmore deal. Last spring. Logan nodded slowly. He knew exactly which one she meant. You flagged the liability exposure in the subsidiary structure, she said. I overrode you. You were right to override me. The deal closed on better terms than I projected. The subsidiary liability is still there. Yes. It'll surface in about 18 months. Probably. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Why didn't you bring it back up? Because you already knew. You were watching it. You don't need me to tell you things you already know. She didn't respond immediately. The wind pushed at the windows. The radiator ticked. Most people tell me things I already know, she said, because they want to be seen telling me things. I know. You don't do that. No. She looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then she looked back at him. Why not? Logan thought about it. Because it's a waste of time, he said. Yours and mine. And because... He stopped. Because what? Because you already know what you're dealing with. The least I can do is not pretend otherwise. Victoria stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked back at the ceiling. I've been running this company for 6 years, she said, and I don't think anyone has ever said anything quite that honest to me. It's not particularly flattering. No, that's why it's honest. Logan said nothing. Outside, the storm moved through without any interest in them whatsoever. Indifferent the way truly large things are, mountain weather and grief and time, all of them just doing what they do. Tell me about her, Victoria said. Harper, how she was this morning. Logan looked at the ceiling. He thought about the knee in his ribs, the toast she'd barely touched, the cartoon, and the not quite goodbye. She always eats more when I'm not watching, he said. The second I'm in the room, she acts like food is optional. Mrs. Delgado feeds her better than I do. Who's Mrs. Delgado? Neighbor, 60-something. She's been my backup plan for 4 years. You pay her? She refuses cash. She accepts soup and the occasional favor and Harper's company on Sunday afternoons. He paused. Harper loves her more than me some days. She doesn't. She might. Children love the people who are there, Victoria said. You're there. It was such a simple thing to say, and she said it so matter-of-factly, without trying to comfort him, just stating it as a fact, that it landed differently than comfort usually did. Yeah, Logan said. The room settled into quiet again. Real quiet now. Not the sharp-edged silence of the car. Not the performing silence of two people pretending not to be tense, but something that had worn through to something more basic. Logan's eyes grew heavy. The last thing he thought, before he drifted toward sleep with the wind outside and a foot of space between him and the most intimidating person he'd ever met, was that he had no idea what tomorrow would look like, and that he was too tired to worry about it, and that Harper would be fine, and that somewhere in the last 2 hours, without him quite noticing, the shape of this terrible day had shifted into something he couldn't name. Not good. Just different. Something he hadn't expected. The heat from the room's small radiator worked its way through the blankets, and the storm outside settled into a steady white roar, and somewhere beneath all of it, Logan Pierce fell asleep. Logan woke up at 3 a.m. to silence. Not the quiet of a room in the middle of the night. The other kind. The kind where you realize something that was there before isn't anymore. He'd slept through the wind without knowing it was doing anything for him until it stopped, and now the absence of it was what pulled him up from sleep, blinking at the dark ceiling, trying to place where he was. Right. The lodge. The storm. The woman 3 feet away from him who ran a billion-dollar company and had somehow, in the space of a few hours, told him more true things than most people he'd known for years. He turned his head. Victoria was on her side, facing away, her breathing steady and even. She slept like someone who'd made a decision to sleep and followed through on it efficiently, which tracked. Logan stared at the ceiling for a while. He was thinking about Harper again. He always was, at 3 a.m., in the specific way that felt less like worrying and more like just being aware of her, the way you're aware of a sound you're monitoring without consciously listening. She was fine. She was with Mrs. Delgado, who had raised 3 children of her own and had more practical experience with 7-year-olds than Logan had accumulated in Harper's entire life. She was fine. He made himself believe it and then lay there in the particular quiet of a snowbound mountain at 3 in the morning, unable to go back to sleep. After a while, he got up, careful not to make noise, and went to stand at the window. The snow had stopped. That was what the silence was. The storm had moved through, and what was left was a landscape so clean and white and complete that it looked less real than imaginary. The parking lot below was buried. The tree line was bent heavy with it. The sky had cleared to that sharp black you only get at altitude, no light pollution, stars hard and bright and crowded together the way they never looked from the city. Logan stood there for a long time. Can't sleep either. He turned. Victoria was sitting up, the comforter pulled around her shoulders, watching him from across the room. Not a question, a statement. Sorry, didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. She nodded toward the window. Is it still coming down? Stopped. Maybe an hour ago, looks like. She got up and came to stand beside him. Not close. A couple of feet between them, same as the bed. The same maintained distance that had become a kind of unspoken agreement. She looked out at the white landscape for a while without saying anything. We're not getting out tomorrow, she said. No, roads will need at least a day to clear, assuming they send plows up this high. Could be longer. She absorbed this with no visible reaction. I have a board call at 9. No signal up here. You'll miss it. She looked at the satellite communicator on the desk. I could send a message to reschedule. You could. She didn't move to do it immediately. She kept looking out the window. The board will assume the worst. The worst being? That I can't manage my own schedule. A pause. It's a particular kind of meeting. There are people on that board who would like nothing more than to walk into a room I'm not in and start making decisions. Logan looked at her profile. The window light was strange, reflected snow glow, pale and directionless, and it made her look less like herself, or maybe more like herself, one of the two. Are they in a position to actually do anything without you? No, not formally. A beat. That's never stopped people. Then let them have their meeting, Logan said. She turned to look at him. They'll talk. They'll feel important for an hour. You'll walk back in, and nothing they decided will have actually changed anything, and they'll know it. He shrugged. There's nothing you can do about it from here anyway. Victoria studied him for a moment. You're remarkably calm about other people's problems. I'm remarkably calm about your problems because they're not mine. I'm not calm about mine. What are yours? He looked out the window. Right now? Getting home to my kid. Something moved through her expression that wasn't pity, less condescending than that, more like recognition. She looked back at the snow. How long has it been since her mother? 4 years in March. She was 3. Just turned 3. She doesn't remember her really. Some things, a smell, a sound, nothing she can put words to. He stopped. She asks sometimes what she was like. What do you tell her? Logan was quiet for a moment. The true stuff. That she was funny and that she didn't have much patience and that she used to sing off key in the car and pretend she wasn't doing it. He glanced at Victoria. I try not to make her into something she wasn't. Erin wasn't a saint. She was a person. That's a generous thing to give a child, Victoria said. The real version. I think it's what she'd want. Erin. He said the name without flinching, the way you can with enough years of practice, not without weight, just without the weight running everything. She had no patience for people being handled. Victoria made a small sound. Neither do I. I know. She turned to look at him again, and this time there was something slightly sharp in it. Is that why you don't handle me? Partly. What's the other part? The other part is that you're too smart to handle, you'd notice. A small pause. Then, very quietly, almost against her will, most people try anyway. I know that too. They stood at the window in silence for a while. Below them, nothing moved. No wind, no cars, no sign of any other person anywhere in the white landscape. The stars were starting to lose their hard edges at the far edge of the sky, the faintest suggestion of something approaching dawn, still hours away but announcing itself. I was engaged once, Victoria said. Just like that, out of nowhere, the same way she'd said things in the car. Like she'd made a decision to say a thing and then simply said it, no preamble. Logan waited. 3 years ago. His name was Daniel. He was smart, genuinely. Not just successful smart, actually intelligent. We agreed on most things. A pause. He told me, 6 weeks before the wedding, that he expected me to step back from the company after we had children. Not immediately. Eventually. What did you say? I gave him back the ring. Just like that? He knew what he was getting into. He decided partway through that he wanted something different. I can't hold that against him. She said it flatly, without anger. Just reporting. But I won't become something different to make someone else comfortable. That I know about myself. Did you want to keep the ring? A long pause. Longer than the others. I wanted to want to keep it, she said finally. That's not the same thing. Logan turned that over. No, it's not. I went back to work the next day, closed the Harrington acquisition that week. She looked at the snow. Everyone in the office thought I was either very cold or very driven. They couldn't decide which. What were you? Hurt. She said it simply. But hurt wasn't useful, so I put it somewhere else and used the energy for something that was. Logan looked at her. She was still looking out the window, her arms folded beneath the comforter she'd carried from the bed, her profile clean and still against the reflected snowlight. That sounds exhausting, he said. It is. She said it without any performance of self-pity, just a fact. Everything about the way I live is exhausting, if I think about it long enough, so I generally don't think about it long enough. That works until it doesn't. Yes, well, a beat. Tonight is one of the ones where it doesn't. Logan didn't fill the silence with anything. He just let it sit, and she seemed to appreciate that, or at least not to mind it. Tell me something true about yourself, she said after a while. Something you don't usually say. He thought about it. I applied to law school 12 years ago, got in, didn't go. Why? Money, partly. My dad got sick that year. Nothing fatal, but bad enough that I needed to be around. By the time things were stable, I'd been in finance for 2 years and couldn't figure out how to go backward. He paused. I've never told anyone at Sterling that. I think some of them would take it as evidence of something. Of what? That I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Victoria looked at him now, directly. Are you? Some days I don't know. He met her eyes. Most days Harper's in front of everything else, so the question doesn't get much air. She held his gaze for a moment, and he had the odd feeling, not uncomfortable, just strange, of being seen by someone who was actually looking, not assessing, not calculating, just looking. Come away from the window, she said. You'll get cold. He moved away from the window. She went back to her side of the bed, tucked the comforter around herself, and lay down. Logan went back to his side and did the same. The dark ceiling again. "Victoria," he said. "Yes." "The board call. Send the message now before you think about it too long." A pause. Then he heard her reach for the satellite communicator on the nightstand. Morning came in gray and gradual, light pressing through the curtains without any particular urgency. Logan woke to the sound of voices somewhere below. Other guests, staff, the lodge resuming its routines, and the smell of coffee coming up from the kitchen on the floor below. Victoria was already up. She was at the small desk with her notebook again, in the same dry sweater from the night before, and she'd pulled her hair back. She didn't look up when he stirred. "Coffee machine in the bathroom," she said. "It's terrible, but it's hot." Logan sat up. His back had registered its complaints about the sleeping situation, though the king bed was considerably better than the cot would have been. He found the machine, made both cups, and set one beside her notebook without comment. "Roads?" he asked. "Marjorie came up at 7. Plows are working the pass. Could be today, could be tomorrow morning." He looked at the window. The sky was flat white, not actively snowing, but heavy looking. "Tomorrow morning, probably." "Probably," she agreed. They ate breakfast in the lodge's small dining room. Eggs, toast, coffee that was only marginally better than the bathroom machine. The room was half full of other stranded travelers, most of them in clusters of 2 or 3, the comfortable muted conversation of people who'd spent an unexpected night in the same place and were now resigned to another. A family with 2 young boys in the corner, a couple in their 60s with a road atlas spread between their plates. A man in a utility jacket eating alone and reading something on his phone. Logan and Victoria sat at a table by the window and ate without much conversation, and it was not uncomfortable. At some point, Logan looked up and caught Victoria watching the 2 boys in the corner. The older one was maybe 10, the younger one maybe 6 or 7, and they were having a low-intensity argument about something that appeared to involve a video game, while their mother ate her eggs and monitored the situation with the particular half-attention of someone who had long since calibrated exactly how much of this required intervention. The older boy knocked the younger one's elbow accidentally, and the younger one's orange juice nearly tipped, and the mother's hand shot out and caught it without looking, and the 2 boys dissolved into brief laughter. Victoria was watching all of this. Her expression was unreadable in the specific way that meant something was happening beneath it. Logan looked back at his plate. He didn't say anything. After breakfast, they walked. It was Victoria's suggestion. She said she needed air, and he wasn't inclined to argue. The lodge had cleared a path around its outer perimeter and most of the parking area, and the cold was sharp but dry now. Nothing moving in the air except for their breath clouding white in front of them. They walked without particular direction or conversation for a while, just moving through the still white landscape, their boots crunching on the packed snow of the cleared path. The mountains in every direction were blanketed and heavy, no sharp lines anywhere, everything softened and smoothed by the snow into something almost dreamlike. "I don't take days off," Victoria said at some point. "I know. Not because I don't know how to, because I don't—" She stopped, seemed to find this slightly irritating. "When I stop moving, I start thinking about whether I've built the right things. It's unproductive. Or important. Those aren't mutually exclusive." "No," he said. "They're not." She walked a few steps. "My grandfather started the first company from nothing. A 2-room office and a personal loan he spent 15 years paying back. He used to tell me, he told me the work was the point, not the money, not the recognition, the work itself." "Did you believe him?" "I do believe him. I just—" Another pause. "I've been doing it long enough that sometimes I'm not sure I remember why I started." Logan put his hands in his pockets. "What did you want when you were starting out?" "To prove something." She said it without embarrassment. "To the board that pushed my grandfather out. To the people who looked at me and saw a woman first and an executive second, if at all. I wanted to build something they couldn't dismiss." A beat. "I did that. And then I kept going because stopping felt like losing." "Stopping and losing aren't the same thing." "No, but they feel the same at 3 a.m. Logan thought about this. He thought about the version of this he knew. Not identical, but related. The way he'd kept moving through the 2 years after Aaron died, through the grief and the diapers and the terrible sleep and the work, always the work. Because stopping and grieving and staying still felt too much like something he wouldn't come back from. The way Harper's face had been the thing that kept pulling him forward when forward didn't feel possible. "It's easier when someone else needs you to keep going," he said. Victoria glanced at him. She understood immediately what he meant. He could tell from the way her expression shifted. "Harper." "Yeah." "She doesn't know she's doing that." "No, that's what makes it work." He looked out at the mountains. "She just needs breakfast and homework help and someone to sit with her when she's sick. The need is so specific and so real that there's no room for anything else. It's almost a relief." Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's the loneliest and the least lonely thing I've ever heard at the same time." Logan looked at her. She was looking out at the same mountains, her hands in her pockets, her exhale visible in the cold air. "Yeah," he said. "That's about right." They walked back inside. The afternoon stretched. They were not people built for stretching afternoons, either of them, and the lodge didn't offer much. A small common room with a fireplace and outdated magazines, a room with a pool table that one of the stranded utility workers had claimed, a television mounted to the dining room wall showing a local news loop about the storm. Victoria worked from her notebook. Logan found a battered paperback on the common room shelf, a crime novel missing its back cover, and read about 40 pages of it without being able to tell you what had happened in any of them. Around 3 in the afternoon, they were back in the room without having explicitly agreed to return to the room, both of them simply having arrived there at roughly the same time after separately running out of other places to be. Victoria was at the desk. Logan was on the bed, not sleeping, looking at the ceiling again with the air of a man who had developed a detailed familiarity with this particular ceiling. "Logan," Victoria said. "Yeah." "The Whitmore subsidiary, the liability." He sat up slightly. "What about it?" "I've been thinking about the structure for 18 months. I have a solution, but it requires restructuring the holding arrangement in a way that will look, from the outside, like we're in trouble. It'll cause 2 weeks of bad press." "It'll cause 3 weeks of bad press," Logan said. She turned around in the chair to look at him. "You know the structure?" "I've been watching it since I flagged it. I know it as well as you do at this point." He pushed himself up to sit on the edge of the bed. "The restructure you're thinking. Is it the parallel holding shell with the liability ring-fenced in the subsidiary?" Victoria stared at him. "Because if it is," he said, "there's a cleaner way. You don't ring-fence the liability. You transfer the whole subsidiary into a new acquisition vehicle and sell a minority stake to a strategic partner. The liability stays inside the vehicle. Your exposure drops to the percentage you retain, and instead of bad press about trouble, you get a press release about a strategic partnership." A long silence. "That's," she started. "It only works if the partner is the right one. You need someone who understands what they're buying and wants the access more than they mind the risk." He paused. "I've been running the numbers on Halcourt Ventures. They want your distribution network. They'd take a minority stake in the subsidiary to get close to it." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. She had gone very still. "When did you work that out?" she asked. "About 8 months ago." 8 months? Her voice was entirely flat. "And you said nothing." "I was waiting to see if you'd get there first. You usually get there first." "I did get there 12 months after you." 4 months after me," Logan said, "which is closer than it sounds, given you had 20 other things on your plate." Victoria stood up. She stood in the middle of the room and looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen from her before. Not anger exactly, though there was some of that underneath. Something else, like she was reassessing something and not sure what to do with the reassessment. "You've been sitting on a solution to a significant company problem for 8 months, she said, "and you didn't bring it to me. I brought you the initial flag. You overrode it. I respected that. You should have pushed." "Should I have?" He held her gaze. "If I'd walked in 8 months ago with a fully developed restructuring plan for a problem you'd already decided to handle, what would you have done?" Silence. "You would have listened to the plan," he said. "Asked me why I was in your office when you hadn't called me and sent me back to my desk. And any future initiative I tried to take would have been filtered through that interaction." Victoria said nothing. "I'm not interested in playing the political game, Victoria. I'm interested in the work getting done." He paused. "The plan is there when you need it. I'll put it in a formal document tonight on the satellite drive." She looked at him for a long time. The afternoon light from the window was low and pale, catching the side of her face, and something in her expression had shifted into something he couldn't quite name. It wasn't the usual clean certainty she moved through the world with. It was more uncertain than that, more complicated. "Why do you work for me?" she said. He frowned slightly. "What?" "You're running restructuring solutions in your head for 8 months and waiting for the right moment. You turned down law school. You've been passed over for a managing director role twice because you don't campaign for yourself." She folded her arms. "Why are you still an associate at my company?" Logan was quiet for a second. "Because my daughter needs stability and predictability and a father who's home at a reasonable hour. Managing director is 60-hour weeks and travel and performance pressure that I don't want to impose on her life right now." "You could hire help. She's had enough disruption," he said, and the simplicity of it, the quiet certainty, stopped Victoria mid-sentence. She's had enough change. What she has right now works for her. I'm not trading that for a title. Another long silence. "That's the most deliberate thing I've heard anyone say about their career in 6 years," Victoria said. Not with contempt, with something closer to bewilderment, like a person who has been moving very fast for a very long time, watching someone who has decided to stand still and trying to understand the logic of it. "It's not deliberate," Logan said. "It's just what matters most." She uncrossed her arms. She looked at the window. She looked at him. "I don't know how to do that," she said. "Do what?" "Decide what matters most and stop there." He looked at her. "I know." She sat back down at the desk, slowly, like something had shifted in her center of gravity. She picked up the pen, put it down, looked at the notebook without seeing it. "When she asked you about her mother," Victoria said. "The first time? What did you say?" Logan thought about it. "She was 4. She came into the kitchen and asked me where Mama was. Just like that, out of nowhere, standing there in her pajamas." He paused. "I sat down on the kitchen floor right there, and I told her that Mama had gotten sick, and that her body had stopped working, and that she wasn't coming home. And Harper stood there thinking about it for a minute, and then she asked if we were having pancakes." Something passed through Victoria's expression. "She wasn't unaffected," Logan said. "She cried for 3 days. She kept asking the same question over and over for a month. But they're in the present in a way adults aren't. She didn't have the architecture yet to hold grief the same way." He stopped. "Some days I envy her that." "Do you still grieve?" Victoria asked, quietly, directly. "Differently than I used to." He looked at the ceiling. "It's not sharp anymore. It's more like a permanent awareness of an absence, like a room in the house that's always going to be empty." Victoria was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I've never lost anyone." "No?" "Both parents living, no siblings. I've had colleagues die." She paused. "I went to the funerals. I felt appropriately sad, but I've never had the kind of loss that rearranges things." She said it without self-pity or defensiveness, just plainly, as if she was locating herself on a map. "I think it makes me worse at certain things. It makes you better at other things." "Like what?" "Like not getting mired. Like moving." He looked at her. "Both of those are harder than they sound when everything feels like it's falling apart." Victoria was looking at him with that same expression from last night at the window. The plain, unguarded one that didn't seem to belong to the version of her that everyone at Sterling Capital was afraid of. "You're strange," she said. "I've been told. I don't mean it as a criticism." "I know." She picked up the pen again. This time she wrote something. Logan looked away, back at the ceiling, giving her the privacy of whatever she was writing. Outside, the afternoon light was going. The sky was doing the thing it does in winter at altitude, where it skips through the pale blue of late afternoon directly into the heavy gray of early evening without bothering much with the transition. Tomorrow, maybe, the roads would clear. They would go back to the city, back to Sterling Capital, back to the hierarchy and the distance and the particular professional relationship that had characterized 23 months of his life. She would be Ms. Sterling again. He would be the senior associate who didn't campaign for himself. Logan looked at the ceiling and thought about Harper's question from this morning, "Bye, Daddy," without looking up, and felt the familiar pull of needing to be back, needing to be in the same physical space as his daughter, needing the weight of her specific small, ordinary need to bring everything back to the right size. He also, underneath that, and carefully, and with some wariness about what to do with it, noticed that the thought of the road's clearing felt complicated in a way he hadn't expected. He didn't do anything with that. He filed it where he filed things that weren't useful yet, and looked at the ceiling and listened to the faint scratch of Victoria's pen. They had dinner in the lodge dining room again, the two of them at the same window table, because there was nowhere else to go and no pretense left in either of them that required choosing a different table to establish distance. Marjorie had told them at 4 o'clock that the pass plow crews had stopped for the night. Visibility was too poor, the snowpack too unstable on the upper grade. They would resume at first light. Best estimate for a clear road was late morning tomorrow, possibly early afternoon. Victoria had received this information with a nod and gone back to her notebook. Logan had gone down to the common room and used the lodge's landline, Marjorie had unlocked it for the stranded guests, to call Mrs. Delgado. Harper came on the line for about 45 seconds. She wanted to know if the mountains had bears. Logan said not in winter. She wanted to know if he had seen any snow foxes. He said he didn't think snow foxes were a thing. She said her friend Celia had seen one on a nature show, and they were definitely a thing. He said he would look into it. She said, "Okay, bye, Daddy," and handed the phone back to Mrs. Delgado without ceremony. Logan stood there with the receiver for a second after she hung up, this small, involuntary smile on his face that he was glad no one was watching. Mrs. Delgado told him Harper had eaten a full dinner and done her homework and was not worried about him at all, which was both what he wanted to hear and vaguely deflating. He thanked her. He meant it. When he got back to the dining room, Victoria was already at the table. She'd ordered 2 glasses of wine from the lodge's extremely limited list, a red, dry, the kind of thing that wasn't great but was appropriate for a snowbound night in a mountain lodge, and slid one toward him when he sat down. He picked it up. She'd already been drinking hers. He noticed she'd ordered for him without asking, and that she'd gotten it right. Not because she knew his preference, but because she'd made a reasonable decision and executed it without second-guessing. That was very on-brand. "Harper?" she asked. "Fine. Worried about snow foxes." Victoria's expression did the thing again, that slight movement around the eyes that Logan was starting to recognize as what she did, instead of smiling when something genuinely caught her off guard. "Snow foxes. Apparently they're a thing. I've been informed. Arctic foxes are white in winter. She might mean those. I'll tell her. That'll go over well. She'll spend the next 2 weeks trying to arrange a trip to see one. Let her. Children should want to see things." Logan looked at Victoria across the small table. She said things like that sometimes. Plain observations about children or about what people needed or deserved, with the same matter-of-fact authority she used when talking about corporate structures, and every time it caught him slightly off guard, the same way. Like there was a whole fluency there she didn't usually deploy. They ordered from the limited dinner menu, both of them getting the same thing without discussion because the options were limited and the right choice was obvious. They ate, they talked, not continuously, not with any particular goal, the way people talk when the evening has run out of urgency and what's left is just the conversation itself. She told him about her grandfather's company, not the arc he already knew from public record, the founding and growth and eventual hostile takeover by a private equity group, but the interior of it, the things she'd watched as a child sitting in the corner of his office on school holidays, the way he'd talked to people, the fact that he'd known every employee's name, not as a performance, but because he'd actually learned them, the fact that when he died there were more than 200 people at the service who weren't family and weren't obligated to be there. "That's what I wanted," she said. "That specific thing." "Do you have it?" She was quiet for a moment. "Some of my people would walk through fire for the company. Some of them would leave tomorrow for better compensation. I'm not sure which group is larger." She turned her wine glass. "My grandfather would have known." "Knowing takes time," Logan said. "You've been moving too fast to know." "I have to move fast. The second I slow down, there are 7 people ready to abetso." "I know, I'm not saying you're wrong to move fast. I'm saying it has a cost." He looked at her. "You already know this." She set her glass down. "Yes?" So, she repeated, like the word meant something slightly different in her mouth than in his. The dining room thinned out gradually around them. The family with the 2 boys disappeared, the boys already asleep on their feet by the look of it. The older couple with the road atlas lingered over their own wine for a while, and then said goodnight to no one in particular and went upstairs. The utility worker ate his dinner early and was gone by 7. Eventually, it was just Logan and Victoria and Marjorie wiping down the far end of the counter with the particular unhurried motion of someone who wasn't going to rush paying customers, but was waiting on them with polite intention. They went upstairs. It was just past 9 when the heat stopped. Not gradually. There was no warning rattle or dying fade. The radiator simply went quiet between one moment and the next, and within 20 minutes the room temperature began its downward slide in a way that was noticeable before it was actually cold, the air taking on that quality of having the warmth drained out of it. Logan was reading, or attempting to, the crime novel was not improving, and Victoria was at the desk, and they both felt it at approximately the same time because they were both already tuned to the physical details of the room in the way that you are when a room is the entirety of your world for the night. "Heating's out," Logan said. "I noticed." Victoria stood and touched the radiator. "It's already cooling." He got up and went to the window. Outside, the night was clear and hard cold, the temperature reading on the exterior thermometer barely visible through the frost on the glass. It was sitting at 11 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was 10 o'clock at night, which meant it would be lower before it was higher again. "I'll call down to the desk," he said. Marjorie answered on the second ring. She sounded tired and apologetic, and said the boiler had gone out. It happened in the old building when the temperatures dropped below a certain point, and the system got overwhelmed. She had a maintenance crew looking at it, but she couldn't promise a timeline. She could offer extra blankets. "How many blankets?" Logan asked. She brought 3. They were the heavy wool lodge kind, the kind that actually did something, and Logan thanked her and spread them across the bed while Marjorie stood in the doorway and said sorry 3 times in the way people say sorry when they mean it, but it doesn't change anything. When she left, Logan turned around. Victoria was standing in the middle of the room in her sweater and lounge pants, arms folded, looking at the bed and the window and the dead radiator with an expression that was doing the very particular work of processing a situation it would strongly prefer not to be in. The temperature in the room had dropped another several degrees while Marjorie was up. Logan could see his breath. "Okay," he said. "Don't," Victoria said. "I wasn't going to say anything." "You were going to say something practical." "I was going to say that we should both get under the blankets and that the 3-foot rule can be maintained without either of us freezing." He picked up the blankets and straightened the bed. "That's all I was going to say." She stood there for another beat. Then she walked to her side of the bed, pulled back the covers, and got in, the same way she'd done the night before, decisively, once the decision was made. Logan got in on his side. He pulled the wool blankets over both of them. The cold was still in the room. It was in the walls and the floor and the air, and the wool blankets helped, but they couldn't replace the baseline warmth that the radiator had been maintaining. Logan lay still and could feel the cold on the parts of him that were exposed, his face, the top of his head, and could feel the warmth trapped under the blankets trying to do its limited work. "Come closer," Victoria said. Just like that. He turned his head. She was looking at the ceiling. "I'm cold. You're warm. This is a practical situation, and I'm treating it as one." She paused. "Don't make it strange." Logan moved closer, not pressed against her, not like that, but close enough that the warmth between them had somewhere to go. 2 people generating enough heat for 2 people instead of each struggling alone. He lay on his back. She lay on her side, facing away, and the warmth between them was immediate and real, and neither of them said anything about it. The cold in the room settled into a steady discomfort, manageable now, not dangerous, but present enough that neither of them was going to sleep easily. The wind had picked up again outside, less ferocious than the night before, but persistent, finding the gaps in the old building's frame and making itself heard. "I'm not good at this," Victoria said. Her voice was different, quieter. The particular quiet of talking in the dark when the dark makes it easier. "At what?" "At being still with someone. I talk at people. I run meetings. I make decisions." A pause. "I don't sit still with someone and just be in a room." "You've been doing it for 2 days. Under duress." "Most true things happen under duress." She was quiet. Then, "Is that a real thing, or did you just think of it?" "I think I read it somewhere. The plagiarism is accidental." She made that almost laugh sound again. He was keeping count without meaning to. "When Aaron got sick," Logan said, and then he stopped. because he hadn't planned to say it and he wasn't sure he wanted to continue. But somehow the dark and the cold and the warmth between them and the particular way she'd been quiet made it feel like the sentence wanted to finish itself. There were 2 weeks where we didn't know how bad it was going to be. The doctors were still running tests, and I remember those 2 weeks as the most still I've ever been in my life. We just stopped. We stopped performing anything, stopped being the versions of ourselves that were for other people. We just sat in rooms together. He heard Victoria's breathing. It was terrible, he said, and I'd go back there in a second just to have that with her again. That specific stillness. He paused. That sounds wrong. It doesn't, Victoria said. It sounds like I'm saying the sickness was worth it. It sounds like you're saying connection is rare, and you know exactly what it looks like when you have it. She paused. That's not the same thing. Logan stared at the ceiling, the cold pressed in from above. She would have thought you were terrifying, he said. Most people do. She would have also thought you were interesting. She liked people who didn't apologize for taking up space. Did she apologize for taking up space? Never. She had opinions about everything, and she shared them with what I can only call aggressive enthusiasm. He smiled at the ceiling. She once got in an argument with my boss at a company dinner about supply chain ethics. 45 minutes. She won. Victoria said after a moment, "She sounds exhausting." She was. She was also the most alive person I've ever been in a room with. He said it simply. I miss that. The specific energy of someone who isn't managing themselves. You don't manage yourself. I do. I manage myself constantly. I just do it quietly. She rolled over. He turned his head. They were closer now than the 3 feet of the previous night, the cold having made that distance pointless, and her face was a foot from his in the dark. He could see the outline of her, the sharp edge of her jaw, the dark of her hair against the pillow, the unguarded qualities she only wore when no one was theoretically watching. What are you managing right now? She asked. Logan looked at her. The fact that I'm talking to you more honestly than I've talked to anyone in 4 years, he said, and that I don't know what to do with that when we go back. She held his gaze. She didn't look away, and she didn't offer him an easy answer, because there wasn't one, and she wasn't the kind of person who pretended there was. I've been thinking about that too, she said. What do you think? I think... She stopped, started again. I think the mountain is its own space, and that what happens in its own space doesn't have rules that translate cleanly. She paused. I don't know if that helps. It doesn't, but it's honest. Yes. The wind pushed against the window. The cold in the room had settled into something almost livable, still there, still present, but the warmth between them under the wool blankets had established a kind of equilibrium, not comfortable exactly, but sustainable. Tell me something you've never told anyone, Logan said. She was quiet for a long time, long enough that he thought she'd decided not to answer. I look at children sometimes, she said finally, and I feel something I don't have a name for. Not wanting them specifically. I've never been sure I wanted them, but... She stopped. There's something, a kind of... She made a small, frustrated sound. I don't have the right word. Grief for something you haven't lost? She stared at him. That's exactly it. Erin called it that. She said she felt it when she watched old couples sometimes, the ones who'd been together for decades. Grief for a life you weren't sure you were building. He paused. She was 28 when she told me that. What did you say? I told her we were building it. She said, how do you know? And I said, because you're in it. A beat. She laughed. She said that was either the most romantic or the most annoying thing I'd ever said. Victoria was looking at him with that plain expression, the real one. What did she think it was? She asked. Both. She made that sound again, the almost laugh that he'd stopped trying to suppress his awareness of. In the dark and the cold, it was very small and very real, like something that hadn't planned to exist. I'm going to ask you something, Victoria said, and I want you to answer it honestly. Okay. In 2 years of working for me, and I want you to think about this before you answer, have you ever actually disliked me? Not professionally, as a person. Logan thought about it. He took it seriously because she'd asked him to and because she deserved the real answer. There was one Tuesday, he said, about 8 months after I started. You overrode a recommendation from the whole analysis team in front of the client without warning us first. It was the right call. The analysis was wrong. But the way you did it, I know the meeting. You didn't have to do it in front of them. No, she said, I didn't. That's the only time. She absorbed this. Not what I expected. What did you expect? More, she paused. Most people have a longer list. Most people don't try to understand why you do things. They just collect evidence of how you do things. And you try to understand why. It's more useful. She was quiet for a moment. It was a bad week, she said. That Tuesday. I'd had a meeting the day before that I've never told anyone about. One of the board members, Reginald Carr, you know him. By reputation. He told me in his office, privately, that the board would be more comfortable if I brought on a co-CEO, someone with, and this is the exact language he used, more traditional leadership experience. Her voice was entirely even. He was referring to a man. He didn't say that because he's been in boardrooms long enough to know what he can and cannot say, but that's what he meant. Logan said nothing. He let her have the space. I walked out of that meeting and went straight to the office and I ran that client meeting wrong, she said. I was angry and I was performing certainty because if I stopped performing certainty for 1 second, I thought something I couldn't afford to lose would give way. She stopped. That's not an excuse. It's a reason. Reasons and excuses feel the same from the outside. They don't. Not if you're paying attention. She looked at him in the dark. You were paying attention. I was. Another silence. The wind, the cold, the warmth between them that had become, over the course of the last hour, something that didn't require explaining. Reginald Carr is still on your board, Logan said. Yes. That's impressive. It's tactical. The corner of her mouth moved. He's less dangerous where I can see him. Your grandfather would have done the same thing. She stilled. Why do you say that? Because you told me he knew every employee's name. That's not sentimentality. That's information management. He looked at her. He sounds like someone who understood that knowing people was the same as knowing the terrain. Victoria stared at him. Something shifted in her face. Something that went deeper than the expressions he'd been cataloging. Something that had to do with being seen in a specific way at a specific moment and not knowing exactly how to carry that. My mother thinks I turned out like him, she said quietly. She doesn't mean it as a compliment. Is it one? To me? Yes, completely. Then that's what matters. She looked at him for a long moment. The cold was still there in the room, the wind still there at the windows, and neither of them was particularly comfortable, physically. He could feel the cold on his face, and she had the blanket pulled up to her chin, and the whole situation was objectively not what either of them would have chosen. And despite all of that, or maybe because of it, Logan had the clear and slightly unnerving sensation of being more present in a moment than he'd been in a very long time. Not happy, exactly. Not simple, just very awake to where he was. I'm scared of this, Victoria said, very quietly, like a fact she was just now getting around to stating. Of what specifically? Of going back and not knowing what to do with... She gestured slightly, meaning the room, meaning the 2 days, meaning the conversation, meaning something she didn't have cleaner language for than that. I don't know what box this goes in. It doesn't have to go in a box. Everything goes in a box. That's how I function. I know. He held her gaze. Maybe that's worth looking at. She didn't say anything to that. She looked at him with that real expression, the one with no management in it, and the cold pressed in from outside and the warmth between them held its ground, and neither of them suggested sleeping, though it was well past midnight now, and they both had to be exhausted. Tell me about Harper, Victoria said. Tell me something she did that made you laugh when you weren't expecting to. He thought about it. 2 months ago, he said, she came home from school with a permission slip for a field trip to the Natural History Museum. She handed it to me very seriously and said, I need you to sign this, and also I need you to know that I've already decided I'm going to be a paleontologist. Just like that, she'd decided, and she was informing me. What did you say? I signed the slip and said that was a great idea. He paused. She said, I know. Victoria looked at him in the dark. The almost laugh again, and this time it came all the way through, small and real and entirely unguarded. Logan felt the warmth of it the same way he felt the warmth under the blankets. Simply, without deciding to. He looked at the ceiling and didn't say anything else, and the night continued to be cold, and Victoria stopped being perfectly still beside him in the particular way of someone who has been holding themselves at a careful distance and has decided, for once, to stop. They didn't sleep for a long time. When they finally did, the cold was still there, and their breathing had gone slow and even, and outside the mountain sat under its new snow, indifferent and enormous and unchanged the way mountains are. The road crew reached the lodge at 11:14 the following morning. Logan heard the plow before he saw it. The low grinding mechanical sound of something heavy working through deep snow, coming up the grade from below, steady and unhurried. He was standing at the lobby window with a cup of Marjorie's coffee when the orange light on the cab came around the bend in the trees, and he felt something in his chest release that he hadn't fully registered as tense. He could go home. The boiler had come back online around 4 in the morning. He'd woken briefly when the radiator started ticking again, the warmth returning to the room in slow increments. By the time proper daylight came through the curtains, the temperature had normalized and both of them had slept through it, which was its own kind of information. He'd woken at 7 to find Victoria already dressed, already at the desk, already working, or performing working, he couldn't tell which, and he suspected she couldn't entirely either. They hadn't spoken much over breakfast, not from awkwardness, or not entirely, more from the particular quiet of two people who had said a lot of real things in the dark and were now giving each other the morning to absorb it without commentary. Logan had eaten his eggs. Victoria had drunk 3 cups of coffee and moved food around her plate. They'd sat at the same window table. Neither of them had chosen a different table. Now he turned from the lobby window and went to find her. She was in the room, finishing her packing, the carry-on neatly organized in the practiced way of someone who traveled constantly and had systems. She looked up when he came in. "Plow's here," he said. "I heard." She zipped the bag, stood, looked around the room once. The desk, the window, the bed with its wool blanket still piled high from the night before, with the quick automatic check of someone making sure they hadn't left anything. She had left something, Logan thought, but it wasn't the kind of thing that got left in rooms. He picked up both bags. She let him. The drive back down took 2 hours on roads that were clear in the center and banked white on both sides, the plowed snow piled high enough in places to wall them in on each side like a corridor. The sky was a hard, clean blue, the kind that only shows up after a major storm has scrubbed everything through. Logan drove with both hands on the wheel out of habit rather than necessity. The roads were fine. Victoria was in the back seat again. She'd moved there without comment when they reached the car, and Logan had said nothing about it because the back seat was where she'd started and the front seat had been a practical decision during the worst of the storm, and they both understood that the geometry of the return trip was different from the geometry of the trip up. That was just true. For the first 40 minutes, she worked on her phone. The signal had returned as soon as they dropped below the pass, and her screen lit up with the accumulated backlog of 2 days off the grid. He could hear the faint sound of notifications still coming in, a steady, irregular rhythm, and he drove and didn't listen. Then she put the phone down. He felt her put it down more than he saw it. The quality of the silence in the car changed slightly, the working silence becoming something else. "The Halcourt proposal," she said. "I want a formal document on my desk by end of week." Logan nodded. "I'll have it Thursday." "The structure you outlined, I've been thinking about the minority stake percentage. 40% is too high. It gives them too much visibility into the subsidiary's internal operations. 25 is cleaner, gives them the distribution access they want without the operational window." A pause. "That's what I was thinking." "I know." Another pause, shorter. "You're going to be annoying to work with now." Logan kept his eyes on the road. "I was already annoying to work with. You were invisible to work with. There's a difference." He glanced in the rearview mirror. She was looking out the window, not at him. The landscape passing, the snow-heavy trees giving way gradually to the lower slopes, the valley beginning to open up below them. "That's going to have to change," she said. She said it like she was working something out rather than announcing a decision. "The invisible part. What does that mean practically?" It means I want you in the room for the Hargrove close, not as support staff. She paused. As a principal. Logan looked at the road. That's a different job description. Yes. I told you why I haven't. I know what you told me. Her voice wasn't impatient. It was the voice she used when she was moving through complexity quickly. I'm not asking you to become a managing director. I'm asking you to be in certain rooms. The hours don't have to change. The title can come later if you want it, or not at all. A pause. I want the thinking in the room, Logan. I don't care what we call the person doing it. He drove for a while without answering. I'll think about it, he said. That's all I'm asking. She picked up her phone again. He drove. The valley spread out below them, and the city appeared in the distance, gray and familiar and waiting. The Sterling Capitol building looked exactly the way it always looked. This was somehow surprising. Logan pulled to the curb at 1:10. He got out and retrieved Victoria's carry-on from the trunk. She was already on the sidewalk, phone to her ear, one finger up in the universal gesture of one moment. He set her bag down beside her. She looked at him. The phone conversation continued. Something about a call at 3, something about a document she needed pulled. Her eyes stayed on him. He nodded once. She nodded back. He got in the car and drove away. The office, the following Monday, was the office. Logan's desk was where it had always been, his monitor showing the same inbox that had been accumulating for 2 days, his chair still adjusted to the exact height he preferred. Marcus from the next desk over said, "Heard you got stuck up there. Wild." Logan said, "Yeah, it was something." Marcus said he'd heard Miss Sterling was stranded too. Logan said that was right. Marcus said with the specific tone of someone fishing, "How was that?" And Logan said fine, in a way that closed the question, and Marcus returned to his screen. The day proceeded as days proceed. Logan worked through the backlog, answered emails, started drafting the Halcourt proposal with the 25% structure. He had lunch at his desk. He attended a 2:00 meeting about a different acquisition that had nothing to do with any of it. Victoria was in her office. He knew because her assistant was doing the particular high-frequency shuttle of someone whose principal was back and operational after an absence, the papers and the coffee and the rapid-fire scheduling adjustments. Through the glass wall of the conference room where Logan sat in the 2:00 meeting, he could see the light on in her office and the silhouette of her at her desk, head down, working at the pace she always worked. It was, from the outside, entirely normal. That was, Logan told himself, exactly what it needed to be. He drove home at 6, stopped at the grocery store for milk and the specific brand of crackers Harper would eat, and no other brand of crackers, picked her up from Mrs. Delgado's, made dinner, helped with homework, read to her for 20 minutes before bed, even though she was at the age where she sometimes wanted to read to herself, and he had to accept that this was good and not sad. He sat on the edge of her bed after she'd gone to sleep and looked at her face in the dark hair and the look that knows you're wrong, and felt the thing he always felt, the specific weight of loving someone this much, which never got lighter and which he had long since decided he didn't want lighter. He went to bed. He lay in the dark and thought about a mountain and a dead radiator and the real expression on a face he wasn't supposed to be thinking about. Then he went to sleep, because there was nothing useful in not sleeping. The Halcourt proposal landed on Victoria's desk Thursday morning, as promised. By Thursday afternoon, her assistant called Logan's desk to say Ms. Sterling had reviewed it and had 3 questions, and could he come up at 4? He went up at 4. Her office was on the 14th floor corner position, windows on 2 sides. Logan had been in it 4 times before the mountain, each time for a specific work purpose, each time with the particular ambient alertness of someone operating in a space where the stakes were slightly higher than normal. He'd always been aware of the room, the clean lines of it, the absence of clutter, the single photograph on the desk that he'd never looked at directly because it felt like the kind of thing you didn't examine without permission. He sat in the chair across from her desk. She was reviewing something on her screen, finished a sentence she was apparently finishing, and then looked at him. It was a completely normal professional interaction. Her expression was composed and focused. His was the same. The 3 questions were real and specific. The structure of the indemnification clause, a timeline question about the regulatory filing, a question about the strategic partner's existing liabilities that Logan had anticipated and had an answer for. The conversation was efficient and substantive and took about 25 minutes. At the end of it, she said, "This is clean work. Thank you." He said, "Thank you for the direction on the structure." She held his gaze for a second, 1 second, barely, like a very brief pause at a four-way stop, and then looked back at her screen. "I'll send it to legal Friday. We'll get the Hargrove schedule to you by end of week." He stood. "Sounds good." He left. In the elevator going down, he stood with his hands in his pockets and looked at the floor indicator and thought, "This is fine. This is how this goes." The mountain was the mountain, and the office is the office, and both things are true at the same time, and one of them is the sustainable one. It was fine. It was fine for about 3 weeks. The Hargrove close preparations started the week before Thanksgiving. There were 7 people in the working group, and Logan was one of them, not labeled differently, not given a new title, just present in rooms he hadn't previously been present in, and asked for input that was listened to at the level it was given. Victoria ran the working group meetings with the efficiency he'd always observed from a distance. And now he was inside it, and he found that being inside it was different from watching it in the way that being inside any moving thing is different from watching it from outside. She was very good. Not just competent, genuinely, specifically gifted at the thing she was doing. She could hold 10 variables in a conversation simultaneously and track them all. And she made decisions quickly, but not carelessly, and she was 3 steps ahead of the room in a way that was either energizing or exhausting, depending on whether you were keeping up. Logan kept up. He knew he was keeping up because she stopped checking whether he was. What he also noticed in the Hargrove meetings and in the 2 other rooms she put him in over those 3 weeks was the board situation she'd described on the mountain. Reginald Carr came to the Hargrove kickoff meeting and spent 40 minutes asking questions that were technically about due diligence and were actually about establishing his own relevance in the room. Victoria answered each one with a patience that was clearly calibrated. She gave him enough to keep him quiet without giving him anything that actually changed the trajectory of the discussion. It was, Logan thought, a genuinely skilled performance, and it also looked exhausting from the inside. After the meeting, in the hallway outside the conference room, Logan fell into step beside her, heading back toward her office. "Carr?" he said. "Yes." The liability question he kept circling. He's going to use it. "I know." "He wants the restructure to go badly." "I know that too." She kept walking. "What I need to know is who's feeding him information about the Whitmore subsidiary. He knows the specific liability figure. That's not public." She glanced at Logan. "That's what I need." Logan thought about it. "Harmon," he said after a moment. "In risk assessment, he had access to the full figure in September, and he had lunch with Carr's chief of staff twice in October. I noticed because Harmon's not a lunch person." Victoria stopped walking. She turned and looked at him. "You noticed Harmon's lunch habits." "I noticed things." She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved in her expression. Not the mountain expression, the other one, the professional one, but with something beneath it that didn't belong entirely to the professional expression. "Have you been noticing things about Carr specifically?" "I've been noticing things about the whole board since you mentioned it on the mountain," he said. "I thought it might be useful." She stared at him. "I can put it in a document if you'd like," he said, "or just tell you now." She looked at the hallway, empty, this particular stretch between the conference room and the elevators. "Tell me now," he told her. It took about 4 minutes, standing in the hallway, the 2 of them speaking quietly enough that it didn't carry. 3 board members who were aligned with Carr's position on the co-CEO question. 2 who were neutral and persuadable. The pattern of Carr's questions in the last 6 months of meetings that pointed toward a specific play he was likely to make around the Whitmore liability when it surfaced. When Logan finished, Victoria was quiet for a moment. "You've been doing this for how long?" "Since you told me about the meeting with Carr, October." 2 months of board analysis. "It's not formal, just observation." "Logan," her voice was even. "That's 2 months of strategic political intelligence on my own board, unprompted, that you've been keeping in your head until the right moment." She paused. "Why?" "Because you needed it, and you were going to figure most of it out yourself, and I could get there first." She looked at him for a long time. The hallway was still empty. Somewhere on the other side of the elevator bank, a phone rang and was answered. "I'm moving you," she said. "I told you I don't want—" "Not up, sideways." She folded her arms. I'm creating a role. Strategic advisor, direct report to me, no managing director hours, no travel requirements except when you choose. I want the board analysis formalized, and I want you in certain conversations that currently don't include you. She held his gaze. The pay adjusts accordingly. Harper's school situation doesn't change. Your 6 o'clock departure doesn't change. Logan looked at her. You've been thinking about this. Since the mountain. He said nothing. Don't turn this down to prove a point, she said. It's the right structure. I'm not turning it down, I'm processing it. You have until Monday. He almost said something and then didn't. She turned and walked toward her office. He stood in the hallway for a moment and then went back to his desk. He told Harper about it on Friday night, in the approximate and simplified version that made sense for a 7-year-old. That his job might change a little. That it was a good thing. Harper was eating a bowl of cereal at the kitchen table, her preferred dinner when Logan gave her the option, which he did on Fridays as a concession to the end of the week. She considered this information while chewing. Does the job change mean you work more? She asked. No, same hours. Does it mean more money? Logan blinked. Yes. Good. She went back to her cereal. Can we get a dog? That's a separate conversation. A small one. Celia has a small one. Celia's small one chewed through 2 pairs of Celia's mother's shoes. That was probably Celia's fault for not training it. Logan looked at his daughter, the dark hair, the eyes, the absolute confidence with which she said Celia's fault in the tone of someone who had thought this through. He felt the familiar thing, the complicated warmth of it, the weight and the lightness simultaneously. We'll talk about the dog, he said. That means no. It means we'll talk about it. Harper looked at him with the look. Then she went back to her cereal, apparently filing the dog question under pending rather than resolved, which was honestly the correct categorization. That night, after Harper was asleep, Logan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and thought about Monday's answer. He already knew what the answer was, had known it, probably, since the hallway conversation if he was being straight with himself. The role was right. Victoria had designed it for what it actually was, not for what it needed to look like on an org chart, which was, in a small way, itself a measure of how much something had shifted. What he was actually sitting with was not the decision about the job. He was sitting with the knowledge that Victoria Sterling was, at this moment, in her penthouse 14 floors above the city, probably working, probably not sleeping particularly well, probably, he thought, putting the mountain in a box the same way she'd said she put things in boxes, or trying to, and probably finding that it was not staying in the box, the same way it was not staying in whatever he'd been using as a box. He didn't do anything with this. He drank his coffee. He was a practical man who understood the distance between a mountain and a city and the value of not doing reckless things with the stability he'd spent 4 years building. But he was also the man who'd told her things in the dark, and who'd heard things in the dark, and who understood, with the specific clarity of someone who had lost enough to know what presence actually felt like, that the thing they'd built over 2 nights in a snowbound lodge was not nothing. It was not nothing, and they were both pretending it was manageable, and the pretending was, in fact, a form of management, functional, intelligent, probably necessary for 2 people who worked together in a structure with very clear lines. He went to bed. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon, he was in the office kitchen refilling his coffee when he heard Harper's name. Not from anyone near him. From his own phone, face up on the counter, a text from Mrs. Delgado. Harper's school called. She got in a scuffle at recess. Nothing serious, but you should call them. He called. The assistant principal, a calm, professionally neutral woman named Ms. Torres, told him that Harper had gotten into a physical disagreement with a classmate. A boy named Declan had told Harper that her mother was probably glad to be dead, rather than be Harper's mom. Harper had pushed him into the handball wall. Logan stood in the kitchen and listened to this. He kept his voice level through the call. He said he would be there to pick her up at 3. He hung up. He stood still for a moment. Then he went back to his desk, told Marcus he had a family thing, and would be out for the rest of the afternoon, and picked up his coat. He was at the elevator when Victoria came out of her office for something. He didn't know what, a meeting, a document, something, and saw him. She stopped, looked at him. He looked like what he was, probably. the controlled face of a man who was keeping something together that wanted to come apart. "What happened?" she said. He told her, briefly, the facts. Harper, the boy, the wall. Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Is she hurt?" "No, the other kid's fine too." "What are you going to do?" "Pick her up, talk to her." He pressed the elevator button. "She did the right thing, actually. I just have to figure out how to tell her that while also telling her she can't push people into walls." But Victoria looked at him. "She pushed him because she was defending her mother." "Yes." "That's—" She stopped. Then simply, "Tell her it was brave. Tell her the wall was the wrong tool. She'll understand the difference." The elevator opened. Logan looked at her. "Thank you," he said. It was a small thing, 2 words, but he meant them at a depth that the small thing didn't quite contain, and from the way she held his gaze for that one moment before the elevator doors closed between them, he thought she knew it. He drove to the school. Harper was sitting outside the assistant principal's office in a small chair, her backpack on her lap, her face doing the thing it did when she was working hard not to cry, and was mostly succeeding. She looked up when Logan came around the corner. "I'm not sorry," she said. "I know," Logan said. He sat down in the chair next to her. "Tell me what he said." She told him. Her voice was steady and small and completely certain. When she finished, Logan put his arm around her and she leaned into his side with the absolute trust that still, every time, made everything else in his life feel correctly sized. "You were brave," he said. "The wall was the wrong tool." She was quiet for a second, then, "What was the right tool?" "Words first. Walk away second. Wall is about number 6 on the list." He said something really bad. "I know. Words and walking away are hard when someone says something really bad." He looked at her. "You'll get better at them." She thought about this. "What if I don't want to get better at them?" "You'll get better at them anyway. That's what growing up is." Harper made a sound of profound dissatisfaction with this answer that was so specifically entirely her that Logan felt it land somewhere deep in his chest. That sound, that face, that small, certain person leaning against his arm. They went in and spoke with Ms. Torres, who was fair and sensible, and who accepted Logan's assurance that Harper understood the policy, even when the policy was hard. They left at 3:30, walked to the car, and drove home. Harper was quiet for most of the drive. Then, just before they turned onto their street, she said, "Daddy." "Yeah." "Do you think Mama would have pushed him too?" Logan kept his eyes on the road. Thought about Aaron. Thought about the 45-minute argument about supply chain ethics. Thought about the way she'd never apologized for taking up space. "Absolutely," he said. Harper considered this. Then she looked out the window and something in her face settled. Not happy exactly, but resolved. Like she'd gotten the answer she needed. Logan parked in front of the building and sat for a second with the engine off. He thought about a hallway conversation and a telephone call from a school, and 2 words said in an elevator doorway, and the fact that the mountain had been 3 weeks ago, but the things said on the mountain had not, in any meaningful sense, stayed there. He thought about a penthouse 14 floors above the city. He got out of the car and went around to Harper's door and took her hand and walked inside. Logan accepted the role on Monday, as Victoria had known he would. He sent her a single email at 8:50 in the morning that said, "I'll take the position. Thursday works for the formal conversation with HR. One condition, the title stays off the company directory for now. I don't want the politics before the work proves itself." She read it, replied with 2 words, "Agreed. Thursday." And then sat with her coffee for a moment longer than the reply required. He understood how things worked. That was still, weeks later, the part that caught her off guard most reliably. The formal HR conversation happened Thursday. The paperwork moved through the week after. By the first week of December, Logan Pierce was, on paper, strategic advisor to the CEO, and in practice he was doing what he'd apparently been doing for 2 years already, thinking 3 moves ahead and waiting for the right moment to say it out loud. The difference was that now the right moment came faster because she was asking for it. The Hargrove close happened on a Wednesday in mid-December, in a conference room on the 32nd floor with 8 people around the table, and Reginald Carr sitting in as a board observer, which Victoria had sanctioned because the alternative was giving him a reason to complain about transparency. Logan was at the far end of the table, not at the center, not performing anything. He spoke 4 times over 3 hours. Each time he spoke, the room shifted slightly. Not dramatically, not in a way that anyone could have pointed to afterward, but the direction of the discussion moved when he introduced something and didn't move back. Carr watched him. Logan didn't appear to notice. After the close, in the hallway, Carr fell into step beside Victoria. "New face at the table," Carr said. "Logan Pierce, strategic advisor." "I don't recall approving a new direct report hire. It's within my discretionary authority. I've sent the documentation to the board secretary." She kept walking. His analysis of the Hargrove subsidiary structure saved us approximately $4 million in potential liability exposure. I thought the board would appreciate the outcome. Carr was quiet for a step. "Where did he come from?" "He's been with the company for 2 years. I'm surprised you haven't noticed him." She smiled. The specific, technically pleasant smile she used when she was finished with a conversation. "I'll send you his file." She walked on. December moved. The way December moves, faster than any other month, compressed by the end-of-year pressure and the particular chaos of everyone trying to close everything before the holidays, as if January were a hard deadline rather than an arbitrary calendar convention. Logan worked at the pace the work required. Victoria worked at the pace she always worked. They were in the same rooms often enough now that the fact of being in the same room lost its charge of novelty and settled into something more durable. What it settled into was something that functioned on the surface and was more complicated underneath, and both of them knew it, and neither of them addressed it directly. And this was, Logan told himself, a reasonable arrangement for 2 professionals who had a working relationship to protect. He told himself this with some conviction for about 3 weeks. The complication was specific and not dramatic. It was the way she looked at him sometimes in meetings. Not the assessing look, the other one, the mountain one. When he said something that landed where she'd been thinking. It was the coffee that appeared on his desk on the morning she knew he had early calls. No note, set there by someone before he arrived. It was the conversation about Harper that happened without being scheduled, whenever Harper came up, which was more often than it should have been in a professional context, probably. But Victoria asked, and the asking was real, not performative, and Logan answered because the real question deserved a real answer. It was the way, when Carr made his move, she called Logan first. The Carr situation broke open on a Thursday afternoon in the 3rd week of December. Logan was at his desk when his phone showed Victoria's direct line, not the assistant routing, her actual line. He picked up. "Carr called an emergency board session," she said. Her voice was level, completely level, which meant she was very angry. "This afternoon, 4 o'clock. He's circulating a memo to the full board right now claiming the Whitmore subsidiary represents an undisclosed material risk and that my failure to formally report it constitutes a governance breach." Logan was already pulling up the Whitmore file on his second screen. He got the liability figure from Harmon. "I know, Harmon's already been walked out. The liability figure is technically accurate. The memo is framing it as undisclosed, which is false. It's in the Q3 Risk Appendix, page 47, line item 14. Disclosed to the full board, signed off by 3 of them, including Carr himself. He signed off on it. Signature is in the documentation. He either didn't read his own material or he's betting I don't move fast enough to get that in front of the board before 4 o'clock. Logan looked at the clock. It was 2:40. "I can have a counterbrief in front of every board member by 3:15, he said. "Clean, 1 page, just the signature and the page reference, and a 2-paragraph timeline of how the liability is being addressed. Don't editorialize. Let the documentation do it." A pause. "That's what I was thinking. I'll start now. Send me the Q3 appendix signature page." It came through in 30 seconds. Logan worked for the next 25 minutes with the specific focus of someone who understood exactly what needed to be on the page and what needed to stay off it. 1 page. The signature, the page reference, a clear 2-paragraph account of the Halcourt restructuring plan. In progress, board sanctioned, timeline attached. No language about Carr. No language about governance. Just the facts arranged in the order that answered the question before the question could become a narrative. He sent it to Victoria at 3:14. She reviewed it for 90 seconds and sent it to the board at 3:16. The 4 o'clock meeting lasted 40 minutes. Logan wasn't in it. It was a board session, and he was not a board member. And his job was to give Victoria what she needed to walk in prepared, not to walk in himself. He sat at his desk and worked on other things with part of his attention and waited with the other part. She called him at 4:52. "It's done," she said. "How done?" Carr moved to table his own motion. The board accepted the Halcourt restructuring timeline and formally cleared the disclosure question. A pause. 3 of his own allies voted against him. The ones who'd signed the Q3 appendix. They didn't enjoy being reminded that they'd signed it. Something shifted in her voice. Not satisfaction exactly, but the particular release of tension that comes after a thing you prepared for actually goes the way you prepared for it. He's not done. He'll find another angle. He will, but he's lost the liability play, and he knows it. Logan leaned back in his chair. He'll go quiet for a few months. Regroup. I know. A pause. Logan? Yeah. Thank you. He heard the weight in it. Not just the professional thank you, not the end of meeting version, the real one. It's what I'm here for, he said. A silence. Not the working silence or the professional silence, the other kind. I'll see you tomorrow, she said. Yeah, see you tomorrow. The company closed early for the holidays on the 23rd. The office emptied out over the course of the day in the gradual way of a place that has decided collectively to stop pretending to work and go be with people. By 3 in the afternoon, most of the floor was dark, and the elevator was doing more runs than the usual end-of-day traffic. Logan finished what he was finishing, sent one last email, and shut down his screens. He put on his coat. He was in the elevator when his phone buzzed. Victoria. Are you still in the building? Logan looked at this for a moment. He. Just leaving. Why? A pause. Then, come up, 10 minutes. He got out at the lobby, stood there briefly, and then took the elevator back up to 14. Her office was one of the last lights on the floor. The assistant's desk was empty, the outer area dark. The office door was open. Victoria was standing at the window, not sitting, not working, just standing, looking out at the city in the particular way that meant she wasn't looking at the city. She turned when he came in. She was in the coat already, her bag on the desk. She'd been about to leave, same as him. Sit down, she said. He sat. She stayed standing. I've been thinking about something for 3 weeks, she said. And I'm going to say it because I'm not good at not saying things once I've decided to say them, which you probably know. I know. We work together. She said it plainly. You're a direct report. I've structured that deliberately, and I think it's the right structure for the work. I'm not confused about that. She paused. I'm also not confused about the mountain, and I'm not confused about the last 6 weeks. She looked at him. I want to know if you're confused. Logan looked at her. She was doing the thing she did, saying the thing directly, no circumnavigation, standing there in her coat in the last lit office on the floor waiting for a real answer. He thought about the kitchen at 3 a.m. and Harper asking about snow foxes, and 2 words in an elevator doorway. He thought about 4 years of a room that would always be empty and what it felt like to stop managing himself for 2 nights in a mountain lodge. No, he said, I'm not confused. Then we have a problem. We have a situation, he said. A problem is something you have to fix. A situation is something you have to navigate. She looked at him. What's the navigation? I don't know yet. He held her gaze. But I know what I'm not willing to do. Which is? Pretend the mountain didn't happen. I did that for 3 weeks, and it was unconvincing. Something moved in her face. It was unconvincing on this end, too. She looked at the window, then back at him. The structure matters. I'm not asking to blow up the structure. Then what are you asking? Logan stood up. He was closer to her now than the professional distance required. Not by much, but by the specific amount that meant something. I'm asking for the honest version of what this is. Not a box, not a policy. What it actually is. She looked at him for a long moment. Victoria Sterling, who made decisions faster than most people identified options, who had walked out of a boardroom today and won, who had run a billion-dollar company for 6 years and made herself into exactly what she'd decided to be. She stood in her coat in the last lit office on the floor and looked at him with the mountain expression, the real one, the one with nothing managing it. It's something I don't have experience with, she said. That's what it is. Neither do I. Not anymore. He paused. The last time I let something happen I didn't plan, I ended up with Harper. That turned out all right. She stared at him. Then, that's a wildly inadequate analogy. I know, it was the best I had. And then she laughed. Actually laughed. Not the almost laugh, not the barely contained one. The real thing. And it was startling and entirely human, and it changed her face into something he'd glimpsed in pieces on the mountain but hadn't seen complete until right now. I don't know how to do this, she said when it passed, not performing the admission, just stating it. You know how to do hard things. Hard things have metrics. She looked at him. This doesn't. No, he said. It doesn't. She was quiet for a moment. I'm not going to be easy. I haven't expected easy since you told me the Slide 9 formatting was inconsistent before we hit the highway. That formatting was inconsistent, I know. Another silence. This one different from all the previous ones, lighter somehow, which was strange given the weight of what they were standing in. There's Harper, he said. It wasn't a warning or an obstacle, just the most important fact. She's everything. Before anything, she's everything. I know. Victoria held his gaze. I would never want it otherwise. He looked at her. She meant it. He could tell she meant it in the specific way he'd learned to read her, the way her certainty wasn't performance but just what things looked like inside her when they were true. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. It was not a resolution. It was not a plan. It was two people standing in an office at the end of a year, both of them carrying things that were real and complicated and unfinished, saying, yes, this is real. We're not going to pretend it isn't. Sometimes that's enough to start with. Christmas came and went. Logan and Harper went to his parents' house 2 states over. His father older now, slower, his mother's back still bad. Both of them delighted by Harper in the specific way of grandparents who don't have to maintain discipline and can therefore appreciate her fully. Harper spent 2 days telling his father about paleontology with the authority of someone who had done significant research and was prepared to go deep on the subject. His father listened with genuine interest. Logan watched this and felt something quiet and good. He texted Victoria on Christmas Day. Nothing significant. A photograph of Harper in the snow outside his parents' house, arms spread, face up, catching snowflakes. No context, just the photo. She replied 20 minutes later. She is entirely herself, isn't she? He smiled at his phone. Completely. A pause. Then, I'm in the office. On Christmas. There's a draft agreement I want to... Victoria. Yes. Go home. A longer pause. I am home. This is where I live. Logan looked at this for a moment. He sat on the porch of his parents' house with the cold coming in and thought about a penthouse that was also just an office with a bed in it, and a woman who had told him she didn't know how to be still with someone, and the fact that this, specifically, this quiet exchange on a holiday he'd never previously associated with her, was a form of being still. Then eat something that isn't from a delivery app, he sent back. I make no promises. He went back inside where Harper was explaining the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event to his father with diagrams she'd drawn on a paper napkin, and he sat down and paid attention to his daughter and his family and let the holiday be what it was. But the New Year arrived with the particular cruelty of New Year's, which is that they feel significant and are in practice just another morning. Logan went back to the office on January 2nd. Victoria was already there when he arrived. This was not surprising. What was surprising was that she came to his desk at 9:15, not calling, not emailing, just appearing, and set a folder down in front of him. Carr resigned, she said. Logan looked up. When? New Year's Eve. Sent a letter to the board chair. Cited personal reasons. She said this with an expression that was professionally neutral and personally something else. What actually happened? His firm lost a significant client in December. A client who, it turns out, had been in preliminary conversations with us about the Halcourt restructuring. When they chose our vehicle over cars, his position became untenable. She paused. He was betting that the Whitmore play would destabilize Sterling enough to devalue the Halcourt deal. When it didn't, and when the deal went through cleanly, he lost the only leverage that made his board seat valuable to his firm. So he resigned before he got pushed. Yes. A beat. He made the smart call. I'll give him that. Logan looked at the folder. And this? The board seat opens up in February. I want to bring in someone aligned with the long-term structure. She looked at him steadily. I want a recommendation from you by end of the week. He opened the folder. 3 names already in it. Her preliminary list. He looked at them, thought about what he knew about each, and nodded slowly. I'll have thoughts by Thursday. Good. She turned to go. Victoria. She turned back. Congratulations, he said. Not about the board seat. She understood what he meant. She held his gaze for a moment. Thank you, she said, with the same weight as before. Then she went back to her office. It was a Saturday in late January when Harper met her. It was not engineered. Logan had come into the office on a Saturday because the Halcourt regulatory filing had a deadline issue and needed 2 hours of focused attention without the week's noise. He'd brought Harper because Mrs. Delgado was visiting her daughter, and Harper had declared, with the confidence of someone who expected this to be persuasive, that she could do her homework in a conference room and be completely not a problem. She was mostly not a problem. She set up her homework in the small conference room adjacent to Logan's desk, asked for the Wi-Fi password, and proceeded to do approximately 20 minutes of homework and then draw elaborate diagrams of something Logan chose not to examine too closely. Victoria came in at 11. She did this sometimes on Saturdays, not regularly, not predictably, just when something needed her and the week had been too full for it. She came in through the main door with a coffee and her bag and her coat, and she stopped when she saw the small person sitting in the conference room. The small person looked up from her diagrams. Hi, Harper said. Victoria stopped in the doorway. She looked at Logan, who had stood up from his desk. He had about 1 second to decide how to handle this, and then Harper resolved it for him by pivoting on her chair and saying, with no social anxiety whatsoever, Are you my dad's boss? Victoria looked at her, then at Logan, then back at Harper. I am. He talks about you sometimes, Harper said. Does he? Not like a lot, but sometimes. Harper appeared to be assessing Victoria with a directness that Logan associated with both his daughter and with the woman standing in the doorway, which was its own observation. You look like someone who has good pens. Victoria blinked. What? Dad says you always have the good pens, the ones that don't skip. Logan briefly considered the floor as a place to look at. Victoria set her bag down on the desk nearest the door, opened the front pocket, and produced a pen. She held it out to Harper. Harper took it, tried it on the corner of her diagram, and nodded with the gravity of a pen expert. This is good, Harper said. Keep it, Victoria said. Harper looked up at her. Really? I have more. Harper looked at the pen again. Then she said, with the directness she used for questions she actually wanted answers to, Why do you work on Saturdays? Victoria pulled out the chair across from Harper and sat down. Because there are things that don't finish themselves during the week. My dad says the same thing. He's right. But you could also just leave them. I could. So why don't you? Victoria looked at this 7-year-old who was watching her with those eyes. The dark hair, the eyes that looked like she already knew you'd done something wrong, exactly as Logan had described. And something in Victoria's face did the thing it did, the movement around the eyes, the shift beneath the surface. Because I built something I care about, she said, and things you care about need attention. Harper thought about this. Like a plant. Like a plant, Victoria agreed. We killed our plant, Harper said. We forgot to water it. What was it? A fern. Dad says ferns are basically impossible, and it wasn't our fault. She glanced at Logan. I still think it was kind of our fault. Logan, from his desk, said nothing and looked at his computer screen with studied concentration. Ferns are very particular, Victoria said. It might have been the light. That's what Dad said. He's probably right. Harper considered this, apparently filing Victoria into some category or other with the quick, pragmatic efficiency of a child who is always doing this and rarely announces it. Then she said, Do you want to see my diagrams? Logan looked up. Victoria looked at the papers spread across the conference table. What are they of? Ecosystems. I'm making one for a world I invented. It has snow foxes. Victoria did not look at Logan, which he appreciated. I've heard about the snow foxes. Did Dad tell you about them? He mentioned them. Harper's expression was satisfied in the way of someone who has received confirmation that the important information is circulating. Sit here, she said, pulling the chair beside her, not the one across, a distinction that meant something to a 7-year-old, even if most adults didn't catch it. Victoria moved to the chair Harper had indicated. Harper spread the diagrams out. Logan sat at his desk and looked at his screen and did approximately no work for the next 45 minutes, because there was something happening in the conference room that was simultaneously ordinary and entirely not. And he didn't want to look at it too directly for the same reason you don't look directly at something you don't want to jinx. He could hear Harper explaining the food chain of her invented ecosystem. He could hear Victoria asking a question about whether snow foxes were apex predators or mid-level, and Harper saying mid-level, obviously, there are frost bears, and Victoria saying, of course, that makes sense, with the tone of someone who was finding this genuinely interesting. He looked at the regulatory filing. He fixed the deadline issue. He sent the email. He sat back. He thought about Aaron briefly, not with grief, not with the specific sharp missing that used to be the primary shape of it, but with the quieter awareness of absence that he told Victoria about on the mountain, the room that would always be empty. He thought about it and let it be true, and then looked at the conference room where his daughter was showing a woman she'd just met the apex predator of a world she'd invented. He thought, Aaron would have thoughts about this. He thought she would have found it interesting, complicated, worth paying attention to. She would have had opinions. She would have shared them with aggressive enthusiasm. She would have wanted him to pay attention. He was paying attention. The snow came back in February, not a storm like the mountain, nothing that dramatic, just the ordinary city kind, the wet, heavy snow that comes in late winter and coats everything gray-white and makes the streets slow and the world temporarily quieter than it usually is. Logan noticed it from his apartment window on a Saturday evening, Harper already in bed, the city doing its muffled winter thing. He stood with a cup of coffee and watched the snow come down under the streetlight outside, and he thought about an orange exterior thermometer reading 11 degrees and a wool blanket and the particular truth of things said in the dark. His phone buzzed. Victoria. It's snowing. He looked at this for a moment. I noticed. Does it bother you now? Mountain Association. He thought about it honestly. No. You? A pause. Longer than her pauses usually were. No. The opposite, actually. He sat down with his coffee. Outside the window, the snow continued its ordinary and different business. Harper wants to show you the finished ecosystem, he sent. She's been adding to it. When? Whenever works. Sunday dinner, maybe. If that's not... Her reply came before he'd finished deleting and retyping the end of the sentence 3 times. Sunday works. I'll bring food. Tell me what she'll eat. He smiled at his phone. Anything that isn't the one specific brand of crackers she requires. I'll handle those. Noted. He put the phone down and looked at the snow and felt the complicated warmth of it, the same feeling as standing at Harper's door at night, different in kind but related in structure, the weight and the lightness simultaneously, the sense of something real that asked to be taken seriously. He took it seriously. She came at 6 on Sunday with food from a Thai place he hadn't tried, but which turned out to be excellent, and a set of colored pens in a case that she put on the table in front of Harper without ceremony, and Harper looked at the case and then at Victoria with an expression that moved from surprise to calculation to decision in about 4 seconds. These are the really good ones, Harper said. Yes. The kind that don't bleed through paper? The kind that don't bleed through paper. Harper opened the case and arranged several pens in a line and examined them with the focused satisfaction of a professional receiving quality equipment. Then she looked up at Victoria. Okay, she said, which meant several things simultaneously, and Victoria appeared to understand all of them. They ate at the kitchen table, Logan, Harper, and Victoria Sterling in Logan's apartment with its particular moods, the overhead light flipped at exactly the right angle, the cramped kitchen, the hallway that led to Harper's room, covered in drawings taped at heights that corresponded to when they'd been made, and how tall Harper had been at each age, a visual record of years running up the wall. Harper talked about the ecosystem. She talked about the frost bears and the snow foxes, and a creature she'd recently added called a glass deer that Victoria asked clarifying questions about, as if she were in a planning meeting and the glass deer's migratory patterns were a material consideration. Logan ate his food and contributed to the conversation and watched the two of them with the peripheral attention of someone trying not to be caught watching. After dinner, Harper brought out the full diagram, now covering 3 sheets of paper taped together, and she and Victoria spread it on the living room floor and crouched over it with 2 of the new pens and added 2 things Harper had been thinking about: a type of moss and an adjustment to the frost bear's territory that Victoria suggested after Harper described the frost bear's dietary habits, and which Harper agreed was more ecologically sound. Logan washed the dishes. He stood at the sink and washed the dishes and could hear Harper explaining something about seasonal migration and Victoria's voice asking something back, and the ordinary texture of a Sunday evening in an apartment that had been, for 4 years, the right size for 2 people, neither more nor less. He finished the dishes. He dried his hands. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked. Harper was lying on her stomach on the living room floor, the pen in her hand, adding something to the upper left corner of the diagram. Victoria was sitting cross-legged beside her. Victoria Sterling, in his apartment, on his floor, in her off-duty clothes with her hair down, looking at a hand-drawn map of an invented world with the complete and genuine attention she brought to everything she decided deserved it. She looked up and found him watching. She held his gaze for a moment. She did not perform anything. She just looked. He came and sat on the floor on Harper's other side. "What's going in the upper left?" he asked. "The glacier," Harper said. "It's where the glass deer go in summer." "Why summer?" "Because the glacier melts a little and there's water underneath, and they like that." She paused, frowning at the corner. "I need blue." Victoria found the blue pen in the case and handed it over without being asked. Harper took it, started drawing the glacier. The apartment was warm and the snow was still coming down outside, and the 3 of them were on the floor of Logan's living room on a Sunday evening, and it was not perfect. Nothing about any of them was perfect. Nothing about the situation was without complication, and the empty room down the hall would always be empty, and Victoria would always be the person who didn't know how to stop moving, and Logan would always be the person who managed himself quietly. But it was real, which was worth more than perfect in every way that actually mattered. Harper finished the glacier and sat up. She examined the full diagram with the critical eye of its creator. "It's good," she said. "It's very good," Victoria said. Harper looked at her. "You can come back and see it when I add the northern region." "I'd like that," Victoria said. Harper nodded, accepting this, and then stood up with the unceremonious efficiency of a child who has concluded the business portion of the evening and is now ready for the next thing. "Dad, can I watch one show?" "One show?" She picked up the pen case and disappeared down the hallway. 30 seconds later, the sound of a nature documentary about actual ecosystems came from her room, which was on brand. Logan and Victoria were on the floor of his living room with the diagram of the invented world spread between them. The apartment was quiet except for the muffled television from the hallway and the sound of the city doing its winter thing outside. "She'll remember this," Victoria said, not sentimentally, just accurately, the way she stated things that were true. "I know." She looked at him. "Are you all right with that?" "What it means, that she'll remember." He understood the question. It was the real question, not about this evening, but about permanence, about what it meant to let someone into the structure of his daughter's life, whether he'd thought it through. "I've been thinking about it since the mountain," he said. "I don't do this lightly." "I know you don't." "And you?" He looked at her steadily. "You don't do anything lightly." "No." She held his gaze. "I don't." "Then we're both clear on what this is." "We're both clear," she said. He reached over and picked up the blue pen Harper had set down. He turned it in his hand, not looking at it. "Erin would have told me I was taking too long," he said. She had no patience for people thinking too long about things that were already obvious. Victoria was quiet for a moment. "She sounds like she was right about that." "She usually was." He looked at Victoria. "I'm not going to compare. I want to say that clearly. I'm not going to do that to you or to her memory." "I know," Victoria said. "I wouldn't let you anyway." He almost smiled. "I know you wouldn't." She looked at the diagram on the floor. The glacier in the upper left, the frost bears in the northern territory, the snow foxes in the mid-level range, the whole invented, careful world of a 7-year-old who had decided, with complete authority, how things worked. "I'm scared of getting this wrong," Victoria said. "Me too." "That's not comforting." "It shouldn't be. It should be honest." He looked at her. "We'll get some of it wrong. That's already true. What matters is what we do about it when we do. She considered this. You're going to say something about tools. I was going to say something about tools. The wall is number 6 on the list. Words first. Walk away second. He paused. We both know how to do the hard version. She looked at him for a long moment in the warm quiet of the apartment. Yes, she said. We do. Done. There's something people get wrong about second chances, which is that they think the second chance is a do-over, a chance to go back and run the same story with better luck, different choices, fewer losses. That's not what it is. You don't get to undo the empty room, or the ring you gave back, or the 4 years of building a life that fit 2 people and learning to make it fit 1. What you get is the chance to build something new with all of it still in you. The grief and the stubbornness and the management and the love that already exists and isn't going anywhere. You bring all of it into the new thing. That's not a flaw in the arrangement. That's the entire point. Logan Pierce was 32 years old, a man who had loved and lost and rebuilt and managed himself quietly through all of it, who had a daughter who believed in snow foxes and frost bears and the right pen for the job. He was not the same person he'd been at 28, and he was not going to pretend that was a tragedy. Victoria Sterling was 30 years old, a woman who had built something extraordinary out of stubbornness and precision and the specific grief of proving something to people who weren't watching anymore, who had never learned to stop moving and was just now, slowly, learning what stopping towards something felt like rather than away from it. Neither of them was easy. Neither of them was finished. Neither of them was the person the other would have designed if given a blank page. They were, instead, the people who had told each other true things in the dark while a mountain sat outside indifferent and enormous, and who had come back to the city and found that the true things had come back too. A year later, on a February evening when the snow was coming down again outside the windows of Logan's apartment, which was no longer exactly the right size for 2, and would soon need to reckon with that, Harper stood at the kitchen table explaining to Victoria, in detail, why the northern region of her ecosystem required a completely new predator she'd designed, and Victoria was drawing it with the blue pen according to Harper's specifications, getting it wrong once and being corrected, getting it right the second time. Logan stood in the kitchen doorway with his coffee and watched the 2 of them at the table under the overhead light that only worked if you flipped the switch at exactly the right angle. He thought about a blizzard that had been indifferent to them. He thought about a road that had disappeared under 6 feet of white and taken all the easy options with it. He thought about what it looks like when something you weren't looking for finds you in the specific place where all your exits have been closed off, and you have nothing left to do but be honest. He thought, this is it, this right here. This is the thing. Not perfect, not simple, not without the empty room down the hall, or the board that would always have a new Reginald car, or the work of learning to be still. Just real, just true. Just the ongoing, complicated, generous, difficult business of being alive and letting other people be alive with you. The predator Harper had designed had 6 legs and a name she hadn't decided yet. Victoria suggested a frost stalker. Harper said, no, that's too obvious. Victoria said, you're right, too obvious. Harper said she would think about it and tell her next time. Next time. Logan went back into the kitchen and made 2 more cups of coffee, and the snow came down outside without caring about anything at all, and the apartment held its warmth against it, and the evening continued in the ordinary, extraordinary way of evenings that matter.